Howdy, Resident Evil gang. We've got a couple more weeks away until we hopefully get some big Resident Evil announcements ahead of the series' 30th anniversary next year in 2026, as Summer Game Fest officially kicks off on June 6th. Today, we're diving into some huge new rumors and information recently revealed from a longtime series insider, going into everything from when to expect Resident Evil 9 to get revealed and released, along with the title's playable protagonists, the game's horror elements, updates to other Resident Evil remakes, that much requested Director's Cut edition of Resident Evil 3 Remake that some fans have been wanting, and more. Yeah, there's a lot to get into here, but know that this is all just rumors and speculation, and all coming from the mouth of Dusk Golem on Twitter, who has had some accurate and not so accurate leaks in the past, so if this speculation is not what you're interested in, then this is definitely not the video for you. You have been warned. There's a lot to get into, so if you're stoked for some big Resident Evil announcements that are likely to come in the next few weeks, PRL412 that like button. Comment down below which Resident Evil games, mainline or remakes, you'd like to see announced soon, and pick up the brand new JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Ocean Stone Fruit flavor over at Supps for 10% off by using my affiliate link in the description. It's been a while since we've had some substantial insider information about Resident Evil 9 and the various remakes that are said to be in development, so get ready for some serious word vomit on Resident Evil 9, a game that is the biggest contender to get announced this year for a release in 2026, punctuating the series' 30th anniversary. Remember the earlier rumors of Resident Evil 9 that we went over in my video discussing absolutely everything we know about Resident Evil 9 and its development? If not, go watch that video after this one, linked in the description. But essentially, early rumors surrounding Resident Evil 9 when it was colloquially referred to as Resident Evil Apocalypse had these Wendigo enemies and the Blood Moon rumors surrounding the 9th moon cycle dominate discourse of the title for a while. And well, Dusk is calling BS on that. The newer rumor surrounding the supposed playtest leak from Biodeclassified last November with the Goat Man and Jill in the hospital, he claims BS on that as well. Now, apparently, Dusk is claiming that Andy from Biodeclassified got his info from an old scrapped version of Resident Evil 9 that has changed and morphed into something very different over the years since the title originally started development in 2017. Spooked by the slow initial sales of 2017's Resident Evil 7, RE9 was aimed to be extremely different from Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, venturing into a multiplayer-focused open-world game. Now, imagine that for a second, right? The multiplayer component was unspecified here in this thread, but I wouldn't be surprised if Resident Evil 5 and 6's co-op functionality was what was being aimed at here in Resident Evil 9's initial design. Getting back to the post, Dusk claims that Resident Evil 9 originally starred Leon S. Kennedy and Jill Valentine as the starring protagonists, set on a fictional island that was based on Singapore. In Andy's playtest leak summary from last November, he did mention that the playtest was set on an island setting. Now, in 2021, Dusk claims that Resident Evil 9 got a huge reboot around the time that Resident Evil Village released, noting that while some things were kept, Leon was ultimately narrowed down as the main character, not hinting at what became of Jill Valentine or her presence in the game. That brings us to the present day, as Dusk states that he wants Capcom to reveal the game rather than himself just spoiling key elements about it. We'll return to more Resident Evil 9 information later, because we've got a lot to go over. But within this thread, Dusk mentions the remakes, where he states that remakes of Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil Code Veronica are still very much happening, going further to mention that Resident Evil 0 went through some big changes sometime last year. Regarding the Resident Evil 1 remake that Andy from Biodeclassified revealed last May from an anonymous email he received, Dusk maintains that the leaks were, again, BS, but that Andy was right that a Resident Evil 1 remake was not in development as of 2023, but that he trusts Andy's judgment with Resident Evil information, mentioning that if it's being revealed soon, that he believes him. Now, that it remains unclear whether it's the RE1 Remake or referencing Andy claiming that Resident Evil 9 will be revealed soon. In any case, only time will tell. Dusk ends the thread by saying that Andy was also right in claiming that Rebecca Chambers was indeed the protagonist of Revelations 3 and that it was initially a Switch game. If you'd like more information on Revelations 3 and what became of it, I went deep into the leaks surrounding this game, linked in the description and also at the end of this video. But if you want a more abridged version as to the development of the game, Dusk recently explains that Revelations 3 was not primarily made in-house at Capcom, and that Capcom wasn't happy with how the game was shaping up. Because Capcom was deeply committed to the development of Resident Evil 4 Remake and Resident Evil 9, Capcom decided to focus entirely on those games rather than salvage the mess that was Revelations 3. Perhaps we'll see Revelations 3 happen someday, especially since so many Resident Evil fans enjoyed Revelations 1 and 2, and with a fan favorite in Rebecca Chambers at the helm, I can definitely see a scenario where Capcom returns to fix Revelations 3, but right now, they likely have other priorities. To get back to Resident Evil 1 Remake one last time, Dusk Golem did bring up the existence of Resident Evil 1 Remake in another recent post, stating that, to his knowledge, the game is not being worked on at this time, but that he fully believes that the game will eventually get remade after Resident Evil 0 and Code Veronica are finished. Okay, that's a lot right there, but guess what? There's more. Getting back to Resident Evil 9 info, Dusk claims that Resident Evil 9 will be returning to the third-person over-the-shoulder perspective, but that he's heard that there's an optional first-person camera, claiming that it's kind of a reverse to Resident Evil 8 Gold Edition, where that edition introduced a third-person perspective to its core first-person gameplay. He's unsure if a first-person perspective will be officially supported though, and maintains that it's a third-person game. As for the horror elements, Dusk claims that he believes the game's horror elements will be turned up, while action elements akin to Resident Evil 4 will be taken down just a few notches, but also notes that the gameplay will be different from many of the previous mainline entries and remakes, quoting Resident Evil 9's director Koshi Nakanishi when he stated last summer that, quote, "It was really difficult to figure out what to do after 7, but I found it, and to be honest, it feels substantial." Just as Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 7 marked huge deviations from what we previously thought of Resident Evil, Dusk is claiming Capcom is going all out to make sure that Resident Evil 9 launches at the highest of quality, to hopefully be the first mainline game since Resident Evil 4 to get over a 90 on Metacritic, stating that Resident Evil 9 has by far the biggest budget of any RE title to date, aiming to cram in a lot of varied content and just push the boundaries of what we've seen of Resident Evil over the years. If it's true that Resident Evil 9 has been cooking since 2017, then should the game release in 2026, the title would have been in development for around 9 years. So yeah, I don't doubt that this game is likely going to be incredibly impressive when we get around to seeing it. Speaking of its reveal, Dusk emphasizes that if Capcom is trying to get the game out before June 2026, that the game will be revealed at this Summer Game Fest in June. Looking back at the past several Resident Evil releases, they have all been released in January through May, so I would be expecting a release in January through March for Resident Evil 9 in order to steer away from May 2026's GTA 6 that most developers are likely trying to avoid. I also think it's entirely possible that Resident Evil 9 could be released in the fall of 2026 if Capcom wants to put out a remake as well to really kick off the 30th anniversary of the franchise, as Dusk earlier this year claimed that Resident Evil 0 Remake was very far into development, thinking that a release as early as fall 2025 could be a possibility. If, say, a remake releases in early 2026, I could see potential for Resident Evil 9 to release later into the year, but let me know when you think we'll see Resident Evil 9's announcement and release date in the comments. I agree. That was a lot of stuff to go over surrounding Dusk's comments on Resident Evil 9 and some of the remakes, but before we close off the video, Dusk is closing off some fans' hopes of some sort of director's cut edition of Resident Evil 3 Remake. A lot of Resident Evil fans were unhappy with the amount of content that did not show up in Resident Evil 3 Remake in 2020, and a particularly vocal part of the fanbase has been clamoring for a director's cut edition to help fill in the spaces where the original game's content should have appeared. But according to Dusk, it appears that Capcom won't be putting out such an edition of the game. And yeah, I honestly just don't see Capcom returning to Resident Evil 3 Remake. I mean, it would be cool for sure, but I'm looking forward to Resident Evil 9 and future remakes, and let's just hope that Capcom took that feedback they received from Resident Evil 3 Remake to heart for their future Resident Evil games. Resident Evil 4 Remake turned out to be enormously successful for them, now being the series' fastest selling game and on pace to likely become the best selling game of the franchise, along with a lot of fans just really digging that game. But we'll just have to see where all that comes later, as right now, Resident Evil 9 and potentially another remake are going to be the talk of the town for Resident Evil in the months ahead. That's all I have for you in this one, my friends. Comment down below which Resident Evil games you hope to see announced at Summer Game Fest, and come find me over in this video as we dive deep into everything we know about what could have been Resident Evil Revelations 3. And I look forward to seeing you all real soon in the next one.